I'm Catherine Winters, 34 years old, staring at a handwritten letter delivered by certified mail. My father's familiar, precise handwriting. Don't try coming to the family reunion. 3 years of silence since discovering the secret he'd kept from me my entire life, and this is what he sends. I just texted back a single word. Understood. What Dad didn't know was that I'd already rented the mansion next door to their reunion venue, and I'd invited every single person he'd ever wronged. Family reunions work both ways. If you've ever felt that gut-wrenching betrayal from someone who is supposed to protect you, this story might feel familiar. Before I dive deeper into how I uncovered the web of lies my father had spun throughout my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from. The comments section has become a kind of family reunion of its own for people who've gone through similar experiences. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about standing up to toxic family dynamics, and drop a like if you've ever had to create boundaries with family members who betrayed your trust. Growing up, I was always known as the perfect daughter. I graduated top of my class in high school, earned a full scholarship to an Ivy League university, and built a successful career as an architect with my own firm by age 30. My achievements weren't just for me. They were monuments to make my father proud. Frank Winters was a respected federal judge in our community. His name carried weight, his opinions mattered, and his approval was something I craved more than anything. Our home was filled with leather-bound law books and framed newspaper clippings about his most significant cases. My childhood memories are colored by the sound of his heavy office door closing when important calls came in, and the smell of his expensive cologne when he'd hug me after winning a difficult case. "Katie," he'd say, using my childhood nickname, "integrity and reputation are everything in this world. Remember that." My mother, Sylvia, was the perfect complement to him. Gracious, intelligent, and unfailingly supportive of his career. She was the one who drove me to piano lessons, debate tournaments, and architectural design competitions. But there was always something sad in her eyes when she looked at me, something I couldn't understand until much later. 2 years ago, on her deathbed after a brief but aggressive battle with pancreatic cancer, she tried to tell me something important. I was holding her hand in the hospital room when she suddenly became agitated. "Catherine, there's something you need to know about your father, about you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the beeping machines. Before she could finish, my father appeared in the doorway. Something passed between them, a look I couldn't decipher, and my mother fell silent. She died the next morning without finishing what she wanted to tell me. That unfinished sentence would haunt me for months. My relationship with my father had already begun to fray 3 years earlier when my engagement to Thomas Blake ended suddenly. Thomas was perfect on paper, a successful environmental lawyer from a good family. My father had approved wholeheartedly, which made it even more confusing when Thomas broke things off 2 months before the wedding.
"I'm sorry, Catherine."
"I can't go through with this," he said, refusing to meet my eyes. "Your father, he told me some things that change everything." No amount of pleading could get Thomas to explain what my father had said. He simply packed his things and disappeared from my life, leaving me with questions that would take years to answer. My older brother Harrison was always our father's favorite. He followed directly in Dad's footsteps, attending the same law school and eventually becoming a prosecutor with clear political ambitions. Harrison and I had been close as children, but as adults, a strange distance grew between us. He always seemed to know things about family matters before I did, as if he were part of an inner circle I couldn't access. My younger sister Tiffany was the family rebel, at least that's how it appeared. She dropped out of college to travel, dated people our father disapproved of, and generally lived in opposition to the Winters family values. Which is why it was so strange when, about 4 years ago, she suddenly reconciled with our father. The hostile distance between them vanished overnight, and soon she was attending family functions with a new politeness that seemed entirely out of character. Our annual family reunions at Lake Geneva were elaborate affairs where extended family, colleagues, and influential friends would gather for a week of carefully orchestrated activities. As a child, I loved these reunions, the swimming, the cousins, the sense of belonging to something greater than myself. But in recent years, the atmosphere had grown increasingly tense. Conversations would stop when I entered rooms. My father would pull Harrison aside for private discussions. My cousins seemed to treat me differently, with a strange mix of pity and discomfort. After my mother's death, while sorting through her belongings, I found a small wooden box hidden at the back of her closet. Inside were letters, dozens of them, with no return address. They were written in a feminine hand I didn't recognize, with cryptic messages that made little sense. I dream about her often. Does she have my eyes? Does she know anything? Please send just one photo. These strange discoveries created hairline fractures in the perfect image I had of my family. But it wasn't until I found the medical records that everything shattered completely. Growing up in the Winters household meant appearances mattered more than anything. Our home in the historic district was immaculately maintained. We dressed appropriately for every occasion. We spoke correctly, using proper grammar and vocabulary. We volunteered for the right charities and attended the right church. From the outside, we were the perfect American family, successful, civic-minded, and morally upright. But there were always small discrepancies in how my father treated me compared to my siblings. While he was proud of my achievements, he never seemed to take the same personal pride in them as he did with Harrison's. With Harrison, it was as if his own blood was achieving great things. With me, it was more like admiration for someone else's creation. I dismissed these feelings as insecurity for years, but they were actually my intuition trying to tell me something important. The first real hint that something was seriously wrong came at my college graduation. A woman approached me after the ceremony, staring at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "You look just like her," she said, before my father appeared suddenly, steering her away with a firm grip on her elbow. When I asked him who she was, he dismissed it as a confused stranger. "Just someone who thought you were someone else, Catherine. It happens." But the look in his eyes told me it was more than that. It was the same look he had when addressing witnesses he knew were lying in his courtroom. I just didn't know then that I was the one being cross-examined by life itself, with crucial evidence being withheld. The summer after my mother died, I decided to finally clean out our family's storage unit. My father had been putting it off, and with both Harrison and Tiffany conveniently too busy, the task fell to me. The unit was packed with furniture, old sporting equipment, holiday decorations, and dozens of cardboard boxes filled with papers. I worked methodically, sorting through decades of my family's life. In the back corner, behind my father's old law school trunks, I found a small fireproof safe. The combination was my mother's birthday. My father always used important dates as his passwords, a habit I found both endearing and predictable. Inside the safe were birth certificates, marriage licenses, property deeds, and a sealed manila envelope with my name written on it. The envelope contained medical records, but not the kind I expected. There was a birth certificate with my birth date, but with different parents listed, Diana and Michael Reynolds. There were adoption papers signed by my parents when I was 6 months old. And most disturbingly, there were court transcripts showing that Diana and Michael Reynolds had been witnesses in a major corruption case my father had presided over early in his career. My hands shook as I read through the documents. Everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie. I wasn't Catherine Winters, daughter of Frank and Sylvia. I was someone else entirely. I drove straight to my father's house, the papers clutched in my hand. He was in his study, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed a legal brief. When he saw what I was holding, his face changed, not with shame or regret, but with cold anger. "Where did you find those?" he demanded, standing up. "Does it matter? Were you ever going to tell me?" His response chilled me to the bone. It was necessary to protect the family name. Those people were criminals. We gave you a better life than they ever could have. Those people were my parents. My real parents. "We are your real parents," he said sharply. "We raised you. We educated you. We made you who you are."
Who am I, then?
"Because I don't know anymore." My father's face hardened. "You're being dramatic, Catherine. This changes nothing. You're still a Winters. But it changed everything. In the heated conversation that followed, I learned that Harrison had known about my adoption for years. My father had told him when he started law school, claiming he needed to know the family secrets as the future head of the family. Harrison knew? All this time. I felt doubly betrayed. He understood the importance of discretion, my father said coldly. The revelation explained so many things. The strange looks, the whispered conversations, the woman at my graduation. It also explained why Thomas had broken our engagement. My father had told him about my criminal bloodline, suggesting that it might damage his career prospects to marry into such genetics. The next day, my father called an emergency family meeting. Harrison was there, looking uncomfortable but firm in his support of our father. Tiffany arrived late, her expression unreadable. Catherine has discovered her adoption, my father announced, as if discussing a minor household issue. I've explained the circumstances, but I want to be clear with everyone. This information does not leave this room. The family reputation must be protected. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Protected from what? From me? From the truth. From unnecessary complications, my father replied. Your biological parents were involved in criminal activities. It would reflect poorly on all of us if this became public knowledge. That's not true, I said, though I had no evidence either way at that point. And even if it were, I have a right to know who I am. Harrison cleared his throat. Katie, Dad's right. Think about his position. Think about my career. This kind of scandal could damage us all. I turned to Tiffany, hoping for support, but her response shocked me even more. I've known for years, she admitted. Mom told me when I was 19. And you never told me? I felt like I was drowning. She shrugged. Why would I? Dad made it clear that my inheritance depended on certain loyalties. That was the moment I truly became estranged from my family. I walked out of that house and didn't speak to any of them for months. The depression that followed was debilitating. My identity had been erased and rewritten without my knowledge or consent. Who was I if not Catherine Winters? What parts of me were real, and what parts were constructed to fit into the Winters family mold? Therapy helped, but what helped more was anger. Anger at being lied to. Anger at being treated as a potential liability rather than a person with rights to her own history. Anger at a father who claimed to love justice, but had denied it to his own daughter. That anger eventually gave me purpose. I would discover the truth about my biological parents, regardless of what my father wanted. 6 months after discovering my adoption, I hired Marcus Jenkins, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. I gave him the limited information I had: my biological parents' names, the court case they had been involved in, and my original birth certificate. This won't be easy, Marcus warned me during our first meeting in his cramped office downtown. These records are old, and if your father wanted them buried, he had the connections to do it properly. I don't care how hard it is, I told him. I need to know the truth. 2 weeks later, Marcus called with his first breakthrough. Your biological parents weren't criminals, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. They were witnesses in a corruption case involving several local officials and a construction company. Your father was the judge. Then why did he tell me they were criminals? That's where it gets interesting, Marcus said. The transcripts I found show that their testimony was crucial to the case. But after they testified, there's almost no record of them. It's like they disappeared. Over the next several months, Marcus uncovered more pieces of the puzzle. My biological mother, Diana Reynolds, was still alive, living under a different name in a small town 3 states away. My biological father had died in a car accident when I was 12. An accident that had some suspicious elements that were never fully investigated. Most shocking of all, I discovered that my father had deliberately separated me from my biological family as part of a deal to win his high-profile case. Diana and Michael Reynolds had been placed in witness protection after testifying, but their baby, me, had somehow been removed from their care and placed with the Winters family instead. There's no legal adoption trail that makes sense, Marcus explained. The paperwork exists, but the process wasn't followed. It looks like your father used his connections to essentially take you from your biological parents.
But why?
Why would he want me? Marcus shook his head. That's still unclear. But it seems your biological mother has been searching for you for years. There are records of her hiring private investigators, filing requests for information, even writing letters to your mother. The letters. The mysterious letters in my mother's wooden box suddenly made sense. They weren't from some unknown person, they were from my biological mother, reaching out to the woman raising her child. As Marcus dug deeper, we discovered other victims of my father's judicial misconduct. There was a land developer who lost everything when my father ruled against him in a case where my father's brother-in-law had conflicting interests. There was a woman who had brought a sexual harassment case against one of my father's colleagues, only to have it dismissed by my father on technical grounds, ruining her career and reputation. I met with Eleanor Campbell, a former clerk who had worked for my father during the early years of his judgeship. We met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, and she was clearly nervous, constantly checking the door as if expecting someone to burst in. "Your father was brilliant," she told me, her fingers fidgeting with her napkin. But he didn't believe the rules applied to him. He thought his intelligence and position gave him the right to decide what justice should look like, regardless of the law. "Did you know about me? About my adoption?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "There were rumors. The Reynolds case was unusual. Your father took a personal interest in it beyond what was appropriate. When the witnesses suddenly lost their child to the judge presiding over their case, people talked. But no one dared say anything officially. Through Eleanor and other sources, I began to build a network of people whose lives had been damaged by my father's actions. Each story added another piece to the puzzle, revealing a man very different from the righteous judge I had grown up admiring. I also reconnected with Thomas, my ex-fiancé. He was hesitant to meet at first, but eventually agreed to coffee at a neutral location. "I'm sorry for how things ended," he said, looking older and more tired than I remembered. "Your father told me that your biological parents were violent criminals, that you had bad blood that might show up in our children. He showed me falsified documents, police reports that I now know were fabricated. And you believed him without talking to me?" The hurt was still raw. Thomas looked ashamed. "He was a federal judge, Catherine. He showed me official-looking documents. And he implied that if I married you, he would make sure my environmental cases never got a fair hearing. My work was too important to risk. More important than us. I finished for him. I was a coward," he admitted. "I should have told you the truth." Through these conversations and investigations, a pattern emerged. My father used his family connections and professional position to manipulate situations to his advantage, all while maintaining an impeccable public reputation. He controlled narratives, silenced opposition, and removed obstacles, including apparently separating a baby from her parents to serve some purpose I still didn't fully understand. The more I learned, the more determined I became to expose the truth. Not just about my adoption, but about the man who had raised me to believe in justice while systematically denying it to others. It was a Tuesday morning in April when the certified letter arrived. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately, the precise, slightly slanted script that had marked birthday cards and school excuses throughout my childhood. But there was no warmth in these words. "Catherine, the annual Winters family reunion will be held July 15th to 22nd at Lake Geneva, as tradition dictates. Given the current circumstances and your continued indiscretion regarding private family matters, I must insist that you do not attempt to attend. This is for the best interest of all concerned. Frank Winters, no, dear Catherine. No love, Dad." Just a formal directive from a man who had once read me bedtime stories and taught me how to fish. I stared at the letter for a long time before picking up my phone and texting a single word in response. "Understood." Within minutes, my phone buzzed with a text from Tiffany. "Did you get Dad's letter about the reunion?"
Yes.
Very clear message. "You should know the real reason. He doesn't want you there. Big announcement planned. He's being considered for Supreme Court nomination. I can't have any family scandals." I nearly dropped my phone. Supreme Court nomination? The pieces suddenly clicked together. My father's increased social appearances, Harrison's cryptic comments about big changes coming, the renewed emphasis on family privacy. It all made sense now. I called Marcus immediately and filled him in on this new development. This changes everything, he said. A Supreme Court nomination means extensive background checks, media scrutiny, character witnesses. Your father can't afford any skeletons coming out of the closet now. Which is exactly why this is the perfect time for the truth, I replied, an idea forming in my mind. That evening, I drove to the Lake Geneva area to scout locations. The Winters family reunion was always held at the historic Lakeside Manor, a sprawling estate with extensive grounds and a private beach. Just down the shore was another property, smaller but equally impressive, Willowbrook House. On impulse, I inquired about its availability for the same week as the family reunion. Actually, it just became available, the property manager told me. The previous reservation was canceled yesterday. It felt like fate. I put down a deposit immediately. Over the next few weeks, I developed my plan. I would host my own reunion at Willowbrook House, a gathering of everyone my father had wronged over the years. We would share our stories, document the pattern of abuse of power, and create a comprehensive file of evidence about his misconduct. If my father wanted to be a Supreme Court justice, he would have to face the consequences of his actions first. The most important invitation went to Diana Reynolds, my biological mother. Marcus had made contact with her, explaining who I was and my desire to meet. Her response was immediate and emotional. "I've been looking for you for so long," she wrote in her email. "There hasn't been a day when I didn't think about you." We arranged to meet for the first time at Willowbrook House during the reunion week. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. While my adoptive family gathered to celebrate their achievements and connections, I would be reconnecting with a mother who had been searching for me for 34 years. I also reached out to Rachel Wong, an investigative journalist who had written extensively about judicial misconduct. She agreed to attend the gathering, not to publish immediately, but to help document the stories ethically and accurately. "These are serious allegations against a powerful man," she cautioned during our phone call. "Are you prepared for the backlash? This could affect your career, your relationships, everything." "My entire life has been built on lies," I told her. "I'm ready for some truth, whatever the cost." As the date approached, I experienced waves of doubt and second thoughts. Was I doing the right thing? Was I becoming like my father, manipulating situations for my own sense of justice? Would exposing him actually help heal the wounds he had caused, or just create new ones? During one particularly doubtful moment, I called Eleanor, the former clerk. "I'm not sure I can go through with this," I admitted. "Catherine," she said gently, "for years, your father has used his power to shape narratives that benefited him, regardless of who got hurt. This isn't revenge. It's accountability. There's a difference." Her words strengthened my resolve. This wasn't about hurting my father. It was about giving voice to those who had been silenced, including myself. In the final days before the reunion, I received unexpected support from my biological family members, cousins, aunts, and uncles I had never known existed. They sent emails, cards, and even family photos helping me piece together the heritage that had been kept from me. "We always knew about you," wrote my biological mother's sister, Aunt Maggie. "Diana never gave up hope of finding you. We've kept a place for you in our hearts all these years." Their messages validated my experience in a way therapy never could. I wasn't crazy for feeling like I didn't belong in the Winters family. I wasn't ungrateful for wanting to know my true origins. I was simply a human being seeking the truth about my own life, a right my father had denied me for 34 years. I wonder if you've ever had that moment of clarity when you realize the path forward, though difficult, is absolutely necessary? When you're watching this, maybe pause for a moment and think about times you've had to make tough choices to protect your own truth. Those decisions shape us, don't they? They're the moments that define who we really are beneath all the expectations others place on us. If this resonates with you, leave a comment about a time you had to stand up for your truth. Let's continue with what happened next, because believe me, Things were about to get very interesting at Lake Geneva. July 15th arrived with perfect summer weather, sunny skies, a gentle breeze off the lake, and temperatures in the mid-70s. From the upstairs window of Willowbrook House, I could see the activity at Lakeside Manor next door. Caterers unloading vans, staff setting up tables on the lawn, and the first arrivals of the Winters family. My aunt and uncle from Boston, cousins from Seattle, my father's colleagues, and their families. I had spent the previous 2 days preparing Willowbrook House with the help of Marcus and a small team of trusted friends. The large sunroom had been set up with comfortable seating arranged in a circle to facilitate conversation. The dining room held a long table for shared meals. Each bedroom was prepared for guests who would be staying overnight. Security cameras had been discreetly installed around the property perimeter, not for surveillance, but for safety, given the sensitive nature of our gathering. "Your father's car just arrived," Marcus informed me, checking the security feed on his tablet. "Harrison's with him." I nodded, feeling surprisingly calm. "Let me know when Tiffany gets there." The first guests to arrive at Willowbrook were Eleanor and 2 other former employees of my father. They seemed nervous but determined, bringing folders of documents and notes they had kept over the years. "I never thought I'd have the courage to speak about this," admitted Robert, a former bailiff. "Your father seemed untouchable." By noon, the house was filling with people. The land developer who had lost everything, the woman from the sexual harassment case, former clients who had suffered from my father's biased rulings, and even a few extended family members who had their own stories of Frank Winters' manipulation and control. At 2 o'clock, a silver sedan pulled into the driveway. Marcus squeezed my shoulder supportively. "That's her." Diana Reynolds was a slender woman in her mid-50s, with the same green eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. She stepped out of the car hesitantly, scanning the house as if she couldn't quite believe she was there. I met her on the front porch, both of us too emotional to speak at first. When she finally reached out to touch my face, her hand trembled. "Catherine," she whispered. "My baby girl." We embraced, 34 years of separation collapsing in an instant. It wasn't a magic solution to all the questions and pain, but it was a beginning. The start of a relationship that should never have been interrupted. Inside, Diana shared her story with the group. She and my biological father had witnessed corrupt officials accepting bribes from construction companies. When they reported it, they were pulled into a complex legal case presided over by Judge Frank Winters. "We were placed in witness protection after testifying," she explained, her voice steady despite the obvious pain. "But when we arrived at our new location, we were told there had been complications with bringing our baby, you, Catherine. Officials said you would be placed with a foster family temporarily." She wiped away tears before continuing. "That temporary placement turned permanent. Every inquiry was blocked. Every appeal denied. We were told if we pursued it, we would lose our protection status and be exposed to the people we had testified against." "Did you ever discover why?" Rachel, the journalist, asked. Diana nodded. "Years later, through a sympathetic marshal, we learned that Judge Winters had personally intervened, claiming that returning a child to witnesses who might still be in danger was not in the child's best interest. He used his authority to essentially steal our daughter under the guise of protecting her." As the afternoon progressed, more stories emerged, each revealing another aspect of my father's abuse of power. Patterns became clear. His selective application of justice, his use of family and social connections to further his ambitions, his ruthless elimination of obstacles to his advancement. Around 4 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Tiffany. "I'm not going to Dad's reunion. Can I come to yours instead?" I hesitated only briefly before responding. "Yes."
Side door.
"Come alone." 30 minutes later, Tiffany slipped into Willowbrook House, looking uncomfortable but determined. The room fell silent as she entered. "I know most of you have no reason to trust me," she said, addressing the group. "But I've been gathering evidence of my father's corruption for years." She opened her laptop and shared a stunning revelation. She had never actually reconciled with our father. Her apparent capitulation had been a strategic move to gain access to information. After Mom told me about Catherine's adoption, I started noticing other things. Phone calls Dad didn't want overheard, files he kept locked away, connections that seemed too convenient. I played the role of dutiful daughter while documenting everything. Tiffany had compiled financial records showing suspicious patterns, emails with concerning content, and recordings of conversations where my father discussed using his position to influence outcomes. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked her privately as others reviewed her evidence. "I couldn't risk it," she admitted. "You're a terrible liar, Catherine. Dad would have seen through you in an instant." I needed him to believe I was on his side. By early evening, word of our gathering had begun to spread. A few local reporters arrived, attracted by rumors of a counter-reunion, challenging the narrative of the respected Judge Winters. They were politely but firmly kept outside the property lines, but their presence signaled that our private reckoning was becoming public. From the back patio, I could see increased activity at Lakeside Manor. Cars were arriving for what appeared to be a formal dinner, probably the event where my father would announce his Supreme Court nomination. My stomach churned with anxiety as I realized the confrontation I had been planning was now imminent. There would be no going back after this. Whatever happened in the next few hours would permanently alter my relationship with my adoptive family and potentially change the course of my father's career. Diana found me on the patio, watching the lights come on at Lakeside Manor as dusk approached. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked gently. "No one would blame you if you decided it was too much." I considered her question seriously. If it was just about me, about what he did to me, maybe I could let it go. But it's not. It's about all these people whose lives he damaged while presenting himself as a champion of justice. Someone has to hold him accountable. Diana nodded, taking my hand. "Then we'll do it together." As darkness fell over Lake Geneva, I saw my father step onto the illuminated terrace at Lakeside Manor, Harrison at his side. Even from a distance, I could see his commanding presence as he prepared to address the gathering of family, friends, and influential connections who would support his rise to the highest court in the land. What he didn't yet realize was that next door, a different kind of justice was assembling, one based on truth rather than power, on actual evidence rather than carefully constructed appearances. "He's seen us," Marcus said suddenly, pointing to where my father had stopped mid-sentence, staring directly at our illuminated gathering. Even from this distance, I could read the shock and anger in his posture. He handed his glass to Harrison and stepped away from his guests, pulling out his phone. Seconds later, my phone rang. After 3 years of silence, my father was calling. I took a deep breath and answered. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice ice-cold. "Hosting a family reunion," I replied calmly. "Just not the family you chose for me." 20 minutes after that phone call, my father's Mercedes pulled into the Willowbrook house driveway, followed by Harrison's Range Rover. I met them at the front door, Diana standing supportively beside me. My father stopped short when he saw her, the color draining from his face. "Diana Reynolds," he said, his voice barely audible. "Hello, Frank," Diana replied with remarkable composure. "It's been a long time." Harrison looked confused, glancing between Diana and me, clearly noting the resemblance. "Dad, what's going on? Who is this woman?" "This is my biological mother," I told him. "The woman whose baby was taken away so that Judge Frank Winters could have a daughter." My father's expression hardened. "This is absurd. You're creating a spectacle based on misunderstandings and half-truths." "Then you won't mind coming inside to clear things up," I suggested, stepping aside to let them enter. The living room fell silent as my father walked in, his commanding presence momentarily intimidating even those who had come to speak against him. Harrison followed, looking increasingly uncomfortable as he surveyed the room full of unfamiliar faces, watching them with undisguised hostility. "What exactly is this, Catherine?" my father demanded. "This is accountability," I replied. "Everyone in this room has a story about how you abused your power as a judge. How you manipulated the legal system for personal gain. How you sacrificed justice for advancement." My father's laugh was dismissive. These are serious allegations from a group of disgruntled individuals with personal grudges. If anyone had actual evidence of judicial misconduct, they would have filed formal complaints. Many did. Eleanor stepped forward. Those complaints mysteriously disappeared or were dismissed by her colleagues and friends in the system. I gestured to the table where we had arranged the evidence gathered over months of investigation. Bank records showing suspicious deposits coinciding with certain rulings. Witness testimonies. Internal memos. Communications that demonstrate pattern and practice of misconduct. And most damning of all, the falsified adoption papers that allowed you to separate me from my biological parents. Harrison picked up one of the files, skimming its contents with growing alarm. Dad, what is this? Is this true? My father's facade began to crack. Harrison, this is a manufactured scandal designed to damage my reputation at a crucial moment. These people have coordinated their stories to create the appearance of impropriety where none exists. That's not true, Diana interjected firmly. You used your position to take my baby because you and your wife couldn't have more children after Harrison. You wanted a daughter, so you took mine. The revelation hit Harrison visibly. He turned to our father. Is that why we suddenly had a sister? You always said Catherine was a blessing after Mom's difficulties. Your mother had multiple miscarriages, my father admitted reluctantly. We wanted another child. The Reynolds baby was going into the system anyway, with her parents entering witness protection. We gave her opportunities she never would have had otherwise. You stole her, Diana said, her voice breaking. You stole my daughter and told me she was better off without me. Other voices joined in, people stepping forward to share their experiences with Judge Frank Winter's particular brand of justice. The land developer explained how my father had ruled against him in a case where my father's brother-in-law stood to profit. The woman detailed how her sexual harassment case had been dismissed on procedural grounds because the accused was my father's golf partner. As the stories mounted, my father's composure deteriorated. His attempts to discredit each speaker became increasingly desperate. This is all circumstantial, he insisted. Nothing here would stand up in court. Perhaps not individually, Rachel the journalist noted. But collectively, they establish a clear pattern that would certainly interest the Senate Judiciary Committee considering your Supreme Court nomination. At the mention of the nomination, my father's expression changed. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Catherine, he said, his voice suddenly conciliatory, we should discuss this privately. I understand you're upset about the adoption. Perhaps I should have handled it differently. But bringing all this up now, in this way, serves no constructive purpose. It serves the purpose of truth, I replied. Something you taught me to value, ironically enough. I've always tried to do what's best for this family, he insisted. Everything I've done has been to build a legacy, to create opportunities for you and Harrison. At what cost? I asked. At the cost of other people's lives and futures? At the cost of separating a mother from her child? As the confrontation continued, the front door opened again, and Tiffany walked in, followed by several members of our extended family who had been at the Lakeside Manor reunion. Word had spread, and curiosity had brought them to see what was happening. My father's face flushed with anger at the sight of more family members entering. Tiffany, what have you done? I've done what Mom asked me to do before she died, Tiffany replied. She made me promise to help Catherine find the truth someday. She couldn't live with what you'd done, Dad. This new betrayal seemed to break something in my father. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment, he looked every bit his 68 years. You don't understand the sacrifices I've made, he said quietly. The compromises necessary for success in this world. We understand perfectly, I told him. That's why we're here. Seeing his position weakening, my father made one last attempt to regain control. Catherine, if you stop this now, if you send these people home and destroy these so-called files, you can come back to the family. I'll welcome you at the reunion. We can work through this privately as a family should. The offer hung in the air, tempting in its simplicity. How easy it would be to accept, to return to the fold, to be Catherine Winters again, without complication. But it would mean bearing the truth once more, becoming complicit in my father's system of selective justice. No, I said finally. I won't be silenced again. At that moment, camera flashes illuminated the windows. The reporters outside had grown in number, drawn by the unusual spectacle of prominent family members arriving at the competing reunion. "This is going to come out, Dad," Harrison said, his voice heavy with realization. "All of it." My father looked at him sharply. "You're my son. You stand with me." Harrison shook his head slowly. "I'm an officer of the court. I can't stand with this." As the reality of his situation became clear, my father made one last desperate play. "Catherine, think about what you're doing. This won't just affect me. It will affect Harrison's career, the family name, your own reputation. Once you start this, there's no going back." I felt a strange calm as I replied, "I know, but some things are more important than reputation. You taught me that integrity is everything in this world. It's time I lived by that lesson." The confrontation lasted well into the night, with more family members arriving as word spread. The careful narrative my father had constructed over decades unraveled thread by thread as more stories emerged, more evidence was examined, and more truth was spoken aloud. By midnight, Rachel and several other journalists had enough information to begin writing their stories. My father left without further conversation, Harrison following him after a long, conflicted look back at me. The Supreme Court nomination announcement never happened that night at Lakeside Manor. As the house finally quieted, with most guests retired to their rooms or departed, I sat alone on the back patio, emotionally exhausted but strangely at peace. Diana joined me, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders against the cool night air. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But I think I will be." The water of Lake Geneva lapped gently at the shore, a constant, soothing rhythm that had witnessed generations of family dramas, secrets, and reconciliations. Tonight it had witnessed mine, not the fairy tale reunion I might have imagined as a child, but something more valuable, the beginning of an honest relationship with my past, my present, and my future. The morning after the confrontation, I woke to text messages from Harrison. "Dad's nomination has been withdrawn. Internal investigation being opened. We need to talk." The next few weeks unfolded in a blur of consequences and adjustments. As predicted, the story made headlines. Federal judge's Supreme Court nomination derailed by adoption scandal and allegations of misconduct. My father took a leave of absence from the bench pending investigation. The carefully constructed reputation he had built over decades was unraveling under scrutiny. Harrison came to see me at my apartment a week after the reunion. He looked tired, the confident prosecutor replaced by a man questioning everything he had believed about his family. "I should have told you when I found out," he said, sitting awkwardly on my couch. "I convinced myself I was protecting you, but I was really protecting him. And myself." "Why did you go along with it for so long?" I asked. He sighed heavily. "I idolized him. Everything I am is modeled after him." Admitting he was capable of what he did to you, to Diana, it meant admitting that my entire life was built on something corrupt. And now I'm trying to figure out who I am without his shadow. He looked at me directly.
"I'm sorry, Catherine.
I failed you as a brother." His apology wasn't enough to heal the breach immediately, but it was a beginning. We agreed to meet regularly, to rebuild our relationship on more honest ground. My relationship with Diana developed slowly, both of us aware that we couldn't simply erase 34 years of separation. She introduced me to my biological extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins I had never known. They welcomed me with an openness that was both touching and overwhelming. "You have her laugh," my biological uncle told me during a family dinner. "When you laughed just now, it was like hearing Diana 30 years ago." These small connections, shared mannerisms, similar tastes, familiar expressions, helped ground me in my new understanding of myself. I wasn't starting from zero. I was reclaiming parts of my identity that had been there all along, hidden beneath the Winters family veneer. Professionally, the fallout was mixed. Some clients distanced themselves from my architecture firm, uncomfortable with the publicity or loyal to my father's connections. Others specifically sought me out, impressed by my stand for truth. I lost some projects but gained others, ultimately emerging with a practice more aligned with my values. Tiffany moved in with me temporarily, while sorting out her next steps. Our shared experience of discovering our father's true nature created a new bond between us. Late-night conversations over wine revealed how differently we had each responded to the same family dynamic, me by seeking approval through achievement, Tiffany through rebellion, and then calculated observation. "I always thought you were the lucky one," she confessed one evening. "Dad's perfect daughter, the one who could do no wrong. I never realized you were just as trapped as I was, just in a different way." By December, the initial media storm had calmed. The investigation into my father's judicial conduct continued, but at a pace that suggested thoroughness rather than urgency. My life had found a new rhythm, still complicated, but authentic in a way it had never been before. For Christmas, I hosted a gathering that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Diana and her family, Harrison and his wife, Tiffany, Thomas, with whom I had established a cautious friendship, and several friends who had supported me through the upheaval. It wasn't a traditional family holiday, but it was genuine. No facades, no unspoken secrets, no performances of perfection. In January, I received a letter, not certified this time, just a plain envelope with my father's handwriting. I let it sit unopened on my counter for 3 days before finding the courage to read it. "Catherine, words seem inadequate after all that has happened. I'm sorry, cannot begin to address the harm I have caused you and many others. But I am sorry, more deeply than I can express. The investigations have forced me to confront truths about myself that I had successfully avoided for decades. The man I became was not the man I intended to be when I first put on a judge's robe. Somewhere along the way, I began to believe that my position entitled me to shape the world according to my vision of right, regardless of the means. Taking you from your biological parents was the first major compromise of my principles. Sylvia and I had suffered through multiple miscarriages after Harrison. When I saw the opportunity to give us the daughter we desperately wanted while protecting a child from what I told myself was an uncertain future, I convinced myself it was justice. That first corruption of my ethics made the others easier. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I would like the opportunity to speak with you in person if you are willing. There are things I should tell you face to face. Your father, Frank, after considerable thought, I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant halfway between our homes. He looked older, diminished somehow without the power and position that had defined him for so long. Our conversation was difficult, painful, but necessary. He answered questions honestly, for perhaps the first time in our relationship. He acknowledged the full extent of his actions without excuses or justifications. And he expressed genuine regret, not just for being caught, but for the choices he had made and the people he had hurt. I was so focused on appearances, on reputation, on what others thought of the Winter's name, he told me. I lost sight of what actually matters. Which is what? I asked. Being able to live with yourself, he replied quietly. Being able to look in the mirror and recognize the person looking back. I didn't offer forgiveness that day, nor did he ask for it. What I offered instead was honesty, about my anger, my hurt, my sense of betrayal, but also about my hope that something better might eventually grow from the painful truth we were finally acknowledging. By the following summer, exactly 1 year after the dual reunions at Lake Geneva, I organized a different kind of gathering. Not a Winter's family reunion, but a celebration of connection that transcended traditional family boundaries. Diana was there, along with her relatives. Harrison and Tiffany came. My father was invited, but chose not to attend, understanding that his presence would complicate the healing process for many. Friends who had become family through their support were welcomed. Even some of the people who had shared their stories of my father's misconduct came, no longer defined by victimhood, but by their courage in speaking truth to power. We gathered at a public park rather than an exclusive lakeside estate. We ate potluck dishes instead of catered meals. We played impromptu games rather than scheduled activities. And most importantly, we related to each other as authentic people rather than as roles in a carefully orchestrated family narrative. As the sun set on our unconventional reunion, I found myself sitting beside Diana, watching the diverse group of people who now constituted my understanding of family. When I texted understood to my father's letter last year, I had no idea what understanding would actually mean. I told her. I thought I was just acknowledging his rejection. And now, she asked, now I understand that family isn't about blood or legal documents. It's not about maintaining appearances or protecting reputations. It's about truth, support, and genuine connection, even when it's messy. Especially when it's messy. Diana smiled, taking my hand in hers. That's worth celebrating. As I watched the people I loved laughing and talking together under the summer sky, I felt a sense of completeness that had eluded me my entire life. The journey to this moment had been painful, complicated, and at times overwhelming. But it had led to something real, a life built on truth rather than convenience, on authentic connections rather than obligatory roles. I had lost the perfect family of my childhood, but I had gained something far more valuable, the understanding that perfection was never the point. Family, in all its imperfect, complex, beautiful reality, was about growing together through truth, even when that truth was difficult to face. Has a family secret or betrayal ever forced you to redefine what family means to you? I know firsthand how difficult but ultimately liberating that journey can be. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it too. Subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for truth and creating authentic relationships even after betrayal. I read every comment, and I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family karma or how you've rebuilt after discovering family secrets. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the family we choose or rebuild can be more genuine than the one we're born into. Your story matters too, and I hope you'll share it below.